はい。では、時間になりましたので、始めさせていただきます。So, now it's time, so I would like to start. So, 皆様、こんにちは。本日は NGOCSW66 国際女性の地位委員会パラレルイベント、日仏女性の人権架け橋ミモザ実行委員会主催のトークイベント、SEITOを中心に大正時代の女性たちが生きた社会背景についてにご参加くださり誠にありがとうございます。はい。Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us at the event about SEITO bluestocking society in Japan 1910, organized by MIMOZA WAYS Women's Rights Theater Cultural Exchange between Japan and France. 制作者のリボアル堀井なみのです。I am the producer Namino HORII RIVOAL of the theater play MIMOZA WAYS 1910 to 2020. So very nice to meeting you. はい。女性学を学び、社会活動に参加しながら、今回初めて演劇を制作しました。I studied gender equality and I am involved in social movements. The MIMOZA WAYS is my first creation. 2017年、フランスでトリニダード・ガルシアさんのフランス女性の視点で描かれた演劇を見たことがきっかけで、ガルシアさんに大きなお力をいただき、2022年2月に京都で制作、公演をコロナ禍で難しい状況の中でしたが、実現することができました。In 2017, I watched Trinidad Garcia's theater play in Paris about French women's stories. Then we collaborated to create this Japanese women's stories theater play, and the MIMOZA WAYS was performed at Kyoto, Japan in February 2022. で、本日、まずは2022年2月の上演されたMIMOZA WAYSの紹介ビデオを3分お送りいたします。Today, first you see the 3 minutes trailer of MIMOZA WAYS played in Kyoto in February. Then I'm sorry, we haven't have yet subtitles. 続いて昨年のオンラインリーディングの際、2022年2月の上演前に録画されましたトークイベントを続けて放映いたします。はい。登壇者は東洋英和女学院大学名誉教授進藤久美子さん、ミモザ演劇脚本演出家、トリニダード・ガルシアさんで、私リボアル堀井なみのモデレーターとして参加しております。Then you see the pre-recording talk between Professor Emeritus Toyo Eiwa Women's University Shindo Kumiko and stage writer and director of MIMOZA WAYS Trinidad GARCIA. 本日はご参加くださり誠にありがとうございます。国連女性の地位委員会パラレルイベントのご関係者の皆様にもお礼申し上げます。何より東洋英和女学院大学名誉教授進藤久美子さん、ミモザ演劇、脚本演出トリニダード・ガルシアさんに感謝申し上げます。Thank you for your participation today. Also, thank you to the NGOCSW for this occasion.I appreciate to Professor Emeritus Toyo Eiwa Women University Shindo Kumiko, also stage writer and director of MIMOZA WAYS Trinidad GARCIA. それではビデオの方を用意いたします。So I prepare video here. 全体で約60分です。ご質問などはチャット欄にお知らせください。So this is about 60 minutes.I hope you enjoy these videos. Then please send us your comments on this chat box or our website. はい。 何か質問などありましたらお知らせください。内容でしたらビデオの方へに移ります。はい、ではビデオをスタートいたします。音声の方など聞こえにくい場合はお知らせください。お願いします。
皆様こんにちは。今日は20世紀から21世紀にかけての女性の歴史のためにお連れいたしましょう。
それまさに私が今しようとしていることよ。パート社員と正社員の給与格差をなくすの。
会社を経営されてるんですか？
ええ、女性もののアクセサリー、靴とかバッグを扱う会社をしています。
バッグ？私バッグ大好きです。なんてブランドですか？
かぐや姫。
嘘！かぐや姫？私このバッグかぐや姫ですよ。すっごい気に入ってて。
嬉しいわ。これ2018年のコレクションのものね。雪の名古屋と名付けたのは名古屋のカフェでカバンのデザインをした時なの。雪の日の辛い過去を思い出させる日だったわ。
見てください。私もずっと履いてるんです。これ
ありがとう。すぐに気がついたわ。去年の冬のコレクションね。
私たちこそ神聖の人である。私たち現代の女性は思いつくあらゆる方法を用いてできる限りのことをしてきたんだ。
我が子のようなこの雑誌は私たちが生み出した。不完全であろうが早産であろうが今はこれでよしとしよ
う。結婚してる女性でも一緒よ。夫婦って言っても形だけでさ、夫は会社と結婚してるようなもんだし、女性は子供と結婚してるようなものよ。まあ少なくとも私たちはいいよね。独り身だけど一緒にいるから。
一緒に笑って一緒に楽しんで生きてるって感じるのは素敵だね。一緒に前に進もう。
So, hello everyone, I am Namino HORII. I am the producer of Mimoza Theoretical Project. I will be moderating this panel after the reading performance of the Mimoza Ways 1910 to 2020. It's my great pleasure that we can have this opportunity to post talk with Kumiko Shindo, Professor Emeritus of Toyo Eiwa Women's University, and Trinidad GARCIA, the writer of Mimoza Ways 1910 to 2020. First, let me explain about Mimoza project a little bit here. Mimoza project is a collaboration between Trinidad GARCIA, a French playwright and stage director, and myself. Mimoza Ways 1910 to 2020 is a play about Japanese women's history from a women perspective. It will be performed in Kyoto in February 2022. So Shindo-san, could you introduce yourself and let us share a little bit of your current major activity and, if possible, the passion behind it?
All right. Thank you, Naomi-san. Hello, Trinidad and everyone.
Hello.
First, I'd like to convey my heartfelt thanks to all the staff who organized today's gender-inspiring event. As an old feminist, I really appreciate I can be a part of this gender event. Well, here, let me just introduce how, in my young days, how I encountered gender issues, which has become my major concern in the rest of my life. I hope this will give you the brief introduction, how the contemporary feminism movement emerged and what the movement aimed at. Upon graduation from the university, I went to the United States to start my graduate work in American history. It was the summer in 1969, and I spent in a small college town in Pennsylvania until 1971. You might realize it was exactly the time when the contemporary feminism movement, so-called women's liberation movement, was rising in the United States and spreading rapidly throughout the world. In many countries, as in Japan, the year of the 1970 is commemorated as the first year of women's liberation movement. Indeed, at that time, even at the small college town in country area, everywhere on campus and in city, I came across the small notice of consciousness-raising get-together and was handed pamphlet of radical feminism. I recall there existed widespread enthusiasm and eagerness among young women, young American women who were determined to change historically man-made society. Although I was not a feminist then, with curiosity, I attended several consciousness-raising meetings, get-together. It was a small group, 10 people at the most, exclusively of women. In the group, every participant are expected to speak out her own experiences peculiar to women. This meeting is designed to let common women like myself find out how we women are treated differently and unjustly in a traditional man-made society by sharing women's peculiar experience of other women. Indeed, in the late 1960s, consciousness-raising grassroots activities has spread throughout the United States widely and rapidly. Through the discussion of consciousness-raising meeting, American women came to realize there has been existing values, customs, and tradition which places women inferior to men intentionally. And they differentiated those socially and culturally constructed and deliberately made differences between men and women from the physical male and female differences of sex. And they named that difference as gender. This finding and naming of gender has a decisive impact to change society. In 1979, when United Nations adopted a convention to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women, it made it very clear that without eradicating the existing gender values, custom, and tradition, we wouldn't be able to eradicate the gender bias in this society. Since then, this convention, which is called SEITO, is in abbreviation, has set the global standard of the future egalitarian society in the world. After I came back to Japan, I got married and raised 2 children, along with teaching at the Women's University and pursuing my research. All along, I have been engaging myself to find out the way to implement gender equality in this heavily biased, gender biased society. And frankly speaking, I'm still in the middle of the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shindo-san. I really look forward to hearing your talk today. So now, Trinidad, it's your turn. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Trinidad. I'm a French author, play author. I'm a director. I'm also actress. I perform. And I'm coming from a Spanish family. I was born in France, but my parents were Spanish. They arrived in France in 1958 for my father and 1959 for my mother. And I grew up between the two cultures because in France it was the beginning of social movements for feminism and other things. And in Spain it was always Franco, so it was two very different point of view of life. But I think from the beginning I felt that I was lucky to born in France. So I always I was conscious because we were 4 daughters and two brothers, and I saw very quickly that there was a big difference in the treatment of boys and girls. So when I started to write and perform, I chose to always to say things with humor because I think it's better. It's soft. It's more softer to give message. I always wrote about relationships between women and men. 2011, there was the Strauss-Kahn affair, and this was really for me something strong because I understand that even if things seems to have changed in France for women, there were still men who think that women are nothing. And so I wrote a play to remind where we are coming from and maybe not come back. Where I'm performing this play for almost 10 years now, very successfully, because all generations recognize themselves in this play, and this is a play where we can learn all the movements that women made. It's about bank account, abortion rights, sexuality, all that concern women. And doing that, I have my own way of being relationships between men and women, and I realized that in fact men are afraid of women for a long time. That's why they try to dominate us. And so now I try to tell women that we have power, and if men are afraid of us, it's because we have a power. So I really try to look for this power in each woman. And I was when I discovered SEITO, it was very important for me because I realized that 1 century ago, miles away, there was women who thought like me today. And I think we have to go on together to show this women's power.
Thank you, Trinidad. It's very nice. I'm so happy now. Exactly, our creation is going on in Japan, in Kyoto. Let me explain how we proceed with this post-talk event. I would like to structure it around 3 questions Trinidad has had when she was writing this scenario concerning women's movement in Japan. Here, I will pose these 3 questions one by one to Shindo-san, and Trinidad will respond to Shindo-san's comment. Now, first question, we've learned a lot about SEITO women from Mimoza creation. It is rather surprising that there were women who spoke out in public about women's issue around 1910. Then could you explain what is the influence of SEITO or bluestocking on Japanese women in this current era?
Yeah, it is
Yes.
really indeed, just now that Trinidad has pointed out, it is really surprising that Japanese women began to speak out women's problem in such early time. Actually, historically speaking, these SEITO women's brave attempts are the starting point of Japanese women's emancipation. It is in 1911, the last year of Meiji era, when Hiratsuka Raicho started the publication of women's magazine entitled SEITO. Her opening statement of SEITO saying, "In the beginning, women was sun, but now women is moon," depending on others, is the first emancipation proclamation by Japanese women. And it provoked the widespread young women's desire for independence and autonomy. Lots of women writers, both well-known and unknown, contributed the article to the SEITO and began to talk about terribly oppressed situation of women then. Japanese women around that time were placed under the strict control of Meiji Civil Law of 1989, which established feudalistic family pattern peculiar in pre-war Japanese society. It is called Ie system. It is important to note that SEITO women are the first group of women who stood up against gender discriminatory values and customs stemming from Ie system. So in order to understand against what of Ie system SEITO women were opposed, let me first explain Ie system itself. For imperial days, Japanese society was not composed of individual citizens. It was considered that the society was made up with Ie, meaning family or household. It put senior male of the family, usually husband and father, at the top of family ladder, giving him absolute power to command family. And all the rights of citizenship were given to the male head of the family. Naturally, women, wife and mother, who situate lowest class within family ladder, was completely disenfranchised. They had neither political rights nor the right to divorce or the property right nor parental right. Under Ie system, to keep the family status of Ie was considered most important, and the marriage was carried between two families of the same class, not between two individuals. It was always a father who decided daughter's marriage. Women married not with a man, but she was to marry into the family, and the duty of married women was to maintain the status quo of the family by giving birth to a son to inherit the family property. If she failed, it made a good reason to be divorced. Good wife and wise mother was the discourse which described the women of Ie system. Women once married had to be obedient to husband under any circumstances. For example, if a husband asked his wife to let his mistress live together with their family, there's no other way rather than willingly accepting it as a good wife. To have a feeling of jealousy was no, considered taboo, disqualifying good wife. SEITO women criticized and negated arranged marriage between two families under Ie system very candidly. They insisted that marriage should be based on love between man and woman. Hiratsuka herself fell in love with a young painter and chose the marriage without registration. She even organized the association to refuse registered marriage, although it didn't work well at that time. Gradually, SEITO women began to discuss and criticize social values and customs under Ie system, such as abortion, chastity, and female sexuality. These direct attack against marriage and value of Ie system by SEITO women caused a great threatening among men naturally. Consequently, SEITO women were obliged to face the severe backlash against them. Particularly the journalism of the time made all-out effort to drag down the fame and courage of SEITO women and distorted their image as sexually loose women. In February 1916, the publication of the magazine SEITO ended. It is partly because of financial difficulty to run magazine, but main reason was Hiratsuka's personal life. In autobiography, Hiratsuka wrote that after marriage and having 2 children, she was tied up with all kinds of domestic work besides making money for her family. And she confessed she could no longer afford to spend any energy for magazine. I think that SEITO women were very brave and courageous, that she could to oppose the arranged marriage of ES system and criticize gender discriminatory values and custom in the very conservative days. However, I also feel that as shown in Hiratsuka's life, they didn't dig the gender equality in private sphere deep enough. They took it for granted that domestic work of caring family was the women's work. In other words, the idea of sharing domestic work with husband, which contemporary feminist advocates, was beyond their imagination. And ironically speaking, like women of SEITO days, we contemporary Japanese women are still engaging in most of domestic work besides earning money for family.
Thank you, Shindo-san. So I learned about yes system through this creation, and I'm thinking this is kind of key to understand this gender equality in this society. So now, Trinidad, how was the social status woman in France in the early 20th century? Was there any women's movement then? How about the position of women, especially with regard to marriage?
Well, as explained, I'm less familiar with this period because I work above all on the period of after Second World War. But I know that what stopped women in their lives is Code Napoleon. Napoleon civil code, and that everything was forbidden for women. They can't. It was instituting the legal incapacity of the married women. The civil code consecrates the inferiority of the women in front of the men in the name of the family and its stability. The women are subject to the authority of their husband. They was under responsibility of father, and when they get married, under responsibility of husband, and no rights for anything. And so this code, it was till 1965 when there was really a change because there was a new law, and it was about reform of matrimonial property regimes will put an end to the incapacity of married women. And this is only the moment she could have a bank account, have a job without husband authorization. It's only 56 years ago. It's amazing. This is my age.
Oh, right.
I see.
And but I also know that there was between the two wars, during the First World War, women have to make men's jobs because they was all in the war. This was good for women because they become free. Men weren't here anymore, so they changed. Above all, what is important that they changed the way they dressed, and it was really something new for women. No more corset, no more big dresses. And so after that, there was really a liberation movement that we call les garçons. And was of course, it wasn't legal and it wasn't recognized by the law, but they did it. They did it. They really have a sexual life with men and women. And that's also why abortion was forbidden. And so with economic crisis in 1929, they start to close again, even in the dress. because what we call les années folles, crazy years, women have a right dress so they can be really free of their movements. And I think it's really important to talk about that too, because the way women dress is also a domination.
Yeah, I was very surprised when you talk about the French women's wartime experience, because I learned from American history that American women in World War II, not World War I, who had substituted men's work during the wartime, maintained the productivity which man produced. And they were very confident, even if they are women, they can do exactly the same work that man used to have done, right? So that makes them very confident, and they think, just like men, we can do it. That enable them to emancipate themselves. But I found it very interesting in the case of the French, the emancipation came more sexually, right? That's very interesting. Sexual liberation, that happened after the First World War is very interesting, I find. Actually, the root of the contemporary feminism stems from that, women's wartime experience. Somebody pointed out that wartime experiences, that they sort of made sure that women are as equally capable to men. Up until then, women be taught that you are physically or intellectually inferior. We are being taught, right? But they proved that they are enough capable, to maintain the productivity to help men working in battlefield, I guess.
That's why I think they're afraid of us, because they know exactly that we can do the same.
Right. But in Japan, wartime experience of women is a little more complicated because we are invader, right? In the World War II, right? So women who cooperated or who helped the women, all women maybe, who have worked as a home front worker are sort of being subject to be accused. We women were also supported the war that men started. In this context, I think it's very difficult to evaluate the women's work during the wartime. So far, the Japanese women are concerned, I guess.
Yes, we can continue. It sounds like we can continue to talk about more than a few hours. So let me continue to the next question. Yeah, thank you. So let me make a question to Shindo-san. So in Japan case, was there any women's movement which followed SEITO? Could you explain the women's movement in the interwar period between the First World War and the Second?
All right. I think, very elaborately speaking, the literary women's emancipation movement of SEITO women developed into women's political rights movement in interwar period between World War I and II, that is up from 1919 through 1940, right? Hiratsuka herself, by experiencing backlash against SEITO, came to realize that some kind of the social reform organization was desperately needed to improve women's situation. And in December 1919, 3 years after Hiratsuka stopped the publication of SEITO, she organized the New Women's Society, the first women's political group in Japan, with Ichikawa Sae, who was become an outstanding leader of women's suffrage movement in pre-war days. As you know, women of this time did not have any political rights. But not only that, women were also prohibited to speak and act politically in public by security police law of 1900. So when Hiratsuka and Ichikawa organized a New Women's Society, they decided to demand the revision of this law at first. Otherwise, Japanese women couldn't even organize any movement demanding for their own political rights. Likewise, in Western world, the period after the World War I was a time when the spirit toward democratization of society was heightened, even in Japan. So the year 1919, when they organized the New Women's Society, was just right time to demand the women's freedom of political action. And on the other hand, Hiratsuka was the ideologue of women's liberation. However, her partner Ichikawa was very keen and capable activist, and to let the congressman revise the law, she succeeded to organize a wide range of women's coalition from the right to the left as a pressure group. And in consequence, in 1922, the 3 years after the establishment of New Women's Society, the Imperial Congress passed a revised bill permitting women to attend the public political meeting. Indeed, this has brought tremendous effect on women by giving them freedom of speech in public. It certainly paved the way for women's political rights movement. Since then, increasing number of women began to speak out their rights, and they organized several groups demanding women's suffrage. Under such circumstances, in December 1924, Japanese Association of Women's Suffrage was organized as the coalition entity of all women suffrage group. Hiratsuka didn't join this organization officially, but she supported it financially by raising funds in various occasions. But Ichikawa, who worked with Hiratsuka in New Women's Society during the organization as executive member and had led the women's suffrage movement until the end of the World War II. In 1925, the next year of its organization, Japanese Association of Women's Suffrage introduced Women's Suffrage Bill to the 50th Congress. First time in history. This 50th Congress was a very democratic one, in a way, because in the same Congress, the law permitting universal suffrage for men was enacted. However, unfortunately, the Congress also passed the notorious security law, which stipulates that any actions and thinking which overturn the current imperial system will be penalized with death penalty or maximum sentence. This law was designed to crack down socialism and communism because it was expected that the Socialist Party will come into being after election. This security law, however, had serious damage on women's suffrage movement. As I said, the imperial system pre-war Japanese society based on Ie system. It was a society that gender equality was justified legally, culturally, and ideologically. For women suffragists under the circumstances, to demand equal political rights to men simply meant the negation of Ie system, which overthrew the imperial system. Therefore, in 1926, the next year of the enactment of security law, Japanese Association of Women's Suffrage held General Assembly to cope with the situation. And there, they decided that they would no longer demand the women's suffrage from the viewpoint of equality to men. Instead, they reinterpreted the purpose of women's suffrage, saying that women's inclusion in politics is to protect everyday lives of people. They insisted that the true purpose of politics is to protect the people's everyday lives. And it is only women's group whose expertise as a housewife can suit to this purpose. Very clever, isn't it? Since then, under the surveillance of security law, women's suffrage movement in Japan never demanded women political rights from the viewpoint of gender equality until the end of World War II. Indeed, looking back upon our history in pre-war days, there's no such women's political rights movement demanding for in terms of the equality to men.
Oh. Yeah, thank you very much, Shindo-san. It's quite really interesting. Thank you. So, Trinidad, so how did the women's political rights movement develop in France? suffrage movement?
I'm not really sure of that. I'm sorry. First of all, I'm not a historical person. I'm a researcher. I'm an actress. But what I know, I just feel involved in that. But I know that during the revolution in France, Olympe de Gouges made declaration of the rights of women and citizens, and she's already, so it was in 1793 she was killed. She was guilty, and but it was the first who tried to change women's rights, and I don't think there was a big movements like in United Kingdom, or they was also in 1876, Hubertine Auclair, who also tried to support women's rights to vote. And in 1883, it became the suffrage of women. But the First World War stopped everything, all the movements for political women. And I don't know exactly what happens between the two World War, but I know that women get right to vote in 1944 with the provisional government of General de Gaulle.
The play starts from 1950. Could you explain why it starts from 1950?
Yes, I started in 1950 because women during the Second World War, women work like men. And after the Second World War, when the men came back, they sent them at home again as housewife. But I thought that maybe these women love to work, and maybe these women wanted to have their own jobs and have earn their lives and be independent. So that was my supposition. I choose 3 women from different category of social category. One who's more operator, one who is housewife keeper, and one who has a family company. And so even if they are coming from different category, social category, they have the same relation with job. They like to work. They love to work, and they don't want to stay at home anymore, even if they don't say it clearly. So that's what my point de départ. I'm sorry, said it in French.
Can I add one thing? I think it's really interesting, wartime women's experience in World War I and the Second has given women, first time in history, the opportunity to work outside home. And they have, by working just like men did, they find themselves, just as I said before, capable enough to work out. They have proven, the work gives us a chance, to be human being, which men used to determine, And with this, I think frustration, when the men came back from the battlefield and start working again, and they have chased out the women who contributed working during wartime, they got very frustrated. But fortunately, in the case of the United States, I think the economy expanded very rapidly after the war, and they definitely needed women's hand as well. So it turned out the double income family had become the middle class standard. And women, for a while, women's frustration being chased out of the work, they came back, That's why I think it takes a while, that the new feminist movement start rising in the late 1960s. It takes, one or 2 decades. But 1950, to start with the 1950 means a lot, I think, really. That's good. I'd like to see you play sometime.
I hope. Thank you. I hope.
Yes, in Paris, Trinidad, 4 times a week at the Comedy Varsity in Paris. Is it correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And also in tour.
Yeah, yes, in tour, yes.
Wow, very successful.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
Every summer, Festival Avignon.
Mm.
And, yes. So let me continue. Next question. It's gonna be a last question. So we learned through Mimoza creation that there have been women's movement all the time for the last 100 years and more. However, Japanese women today are still heavily discriminated against in various aspects of society, such as wages and political representation. We had two feminism movements in around 1910 and in the 1970s. Trinidad mentioned that women tried to change themselves. So what do you think, Shindo-san, about this idea?
Yeah, I think I have, by reading what Trinidad has written, I have felt that the writer wanted, that question is exactly what writer wanted to appeal to us. That is our feminist movement of around 1910 and the 1970s has something in common beyond time. I found it very interesting that and indicative when feminist writer found both of these feminism movements were directed toward self-reform of individual women rather than changing the society directly. And in fact, looking back upon my experiences in the 1970s, I can point out we were very enthused with theoretical or ideological aspects of feminism. We were busy to introduce different approaches of feminism, such as liberal, radical, or socialist feminism. Just like SEITO women engaged in what we call now the maternity protection debate, we used to debate which approach of feminism would make us emancipate better or farther. I myself regret it simply ended up in practical proposition, right? However, at the same time, even then, there did exist various feminist groups designed to transform society directly. Unfortunately, most of these groups failed to gain impetus strong enough to change framework of gender-biased society. As here, I have one successful example. Let me explain the group pursuing the co-education of domestic home economics in school curriculum. This group was set up in 1973, with the advice of Saichikawa, who used to be suffragist in pre-war days and was working as counselors for years then. As you know, after the World War II, Japanese women were fully enfranchised by the Constitution of Japan. Since then, a lot of women's groups came into being, such as League of Women's Borders, Housewives Association. However, women's group specifically oriented women's emancipation were non-existent. So in the early 1970s, when new wave of feminism movement started, Ichikawa found it very high time to start women's emancipation and summoned women. In consequence, this group pursuing co-education of home economics was organized. What's important with this group is its purpose to implement co-education of home economics in school curriculum. As I pointed out, the contemporary feminism found the existence of gender as a root of discrimination against women. And that gender value is embodied in our society as a division of work along the sex line. In other words, unpaid housewife for women's work, as opposed to work of men, has firmly embedded in society. Children learn such division of work along sex line at home as well as school. So by making home economics co-education boy students are forced to study the subject along with girl students, which make them learn the sharing of domestic work. In fact, in 1980, when Japanese government signed the convention to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women in the Second World Women's Conference, we were required to achieve 3 measures by the United Nations to ratify the convention. First, we were asked to change nationality law from paternal line to parental line. Second, enactment of equal opportunity law was asked. And lastly, United Nations requested us to implement the co-education of home economics in school curriculum. We have achieved the first 2 requests in 1985 and successfully ratified the convention. However, the last one, the implementation of co-education of home economics in school curriculum was delayed few years because Ministry of Education was very negative. Importantly, it was the leadership of Councillor Ichikawa and the women's pressure activities which materialized finally co-education of home economics in high school curriculum. Now in Japan, we have all kinds of law guaranteeing gender equality. Equal opportunity law enacted in 1985, which followed Basic Act for Gender Equality in 1999. Law to advance gender equality in the field of politics was also enacted in 2018. However, no matter how legally gender equality is protected, the actuality in Japan is far from it. I think it is simply because we lack in political will to carry it out.
Thank you, Shindo-san. So Trinidad, in 2000, so French feminists succeeded in the parity amendment of the constitution. Could you explain how French society has changed, if you have seen towards gender equality? Then can we see these issues in your play?
I talk about the law because as I told you, I'm not really involved in political movement, but I remember that in 1981, François Mitterrand was president, chose for the first time a woman prime minister. She has a lot. She was a lot criticized, even insulted even. It was really, really hard. But what I also see is that, as you say, in Japan, women are not going outside and manifestation and say we want rights. No, they try to change themselves. In France, of course, we have this culture to go out in the street and say we want that, but men don't hear that, they don't care. So I think maybe it's better to try to change your own life and see what women you want to become less time, and you grow up and you make it a good choice for you. So what I think is that women who wants to involve in politics, they become like men. They have the same will of power. And so I don't think it changed so much that we have women in politics. That's my point of view, of course. As I say, I'm not a historical researcher, so I don't want to say wrong things, but this is only my opinion. What I see is that when women are involved in politics, they become like men. So I don't really see difference.
Mm. I see.
And after it was a man who really tried to make parity. It was a Prime Minister, Lionel Jospin, and it was under Jacques Chirac government. And I think it would be better that we choose people, men or women, because they are capable. sorry, I think that when we are involved in feminist movement, or when you bring back from history women fight, or when I tell in my plays women movement, we are doing politics. And I think it's maybe it comes from heart, it comes from our story. So maybe I think it's maybe more useful that to be involved in a world made by men.
Thank you very much, Trinidad. So now we are almost closing time. So before closing, I would like to have a few words from both of you. So Shindo-san, please.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to congratulate Trinidad and Namino-san on this successful collaboration on gender event. I just admire the devotion and passion of both of you to change this gender biased society through theatrical work. And I enjoyed very much to be a part of your collaborated Mimoza project. As we all are aware, the gender situation in Japan is getting worse and worse in this past 20 years. This phenomenon became particularly evident after the backlash against sex education in the beginning of this century. Every year, when World Economic Forum released the world ranking of gender gap index, we are lowering way down. And this year, we rank the 120th among 156 nations. It is as if we are walking reverse direction from the international attempt for gender equality. However, as an old feminist, I do have a hope in our future. Just like today's event indicates, in recent years, I've seen some upsurge among young women and men working for more egalitarian and justifiable society. Because they are experts of internet as a tool of communication, their race consciousness can widely and rapidly spread, I hope. Under this corona epidemic society, I do hope new Japanese women's movement advocating women's lives matter will take place in our society in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shindo-san. Thank you for your word. So Trinidad, please.
But first of all, I tell you a lot of time. Thank you for asking me to make this project with you and meet some wonderful women as Shindo and a lot of you. And the more I work in this project, the more I see that's really a gift for me, and I hope that it will be for all the women and all men too that are going to discover your history by this way, by theatrical project. I think that that, as I told before, sometimes theater, culture, literature could be stronger than laws because it touched each one in more intimacy. So I think that each one have to find his way, but what is important for women today is really to see they are powerful, they are strong, and they are beautiful. And that's, I think that we don't have to care about what men think. I think we really have to concentrate on that. We are powerful and we are wonderful. And each one of us.
Yeah.
That's
yes,
my message.
Each one of us.
We are not victims, we are strong.
Each one of us, we are powerful. Like Hiratsuka Raicho said, everyone genius, right? 女性はみな一人一人天才であるということですよね。はい。Thank you very much. I would like to say thank you to thank you both of you, and thank you everyone for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you again at the theater or online event. So goodbye and thank you all, and see you soon again. Like